Okay, everybody, welcome to the first episode of The Original Take. My name's Seth Allen. I'm the moderator for today, joined by a wonderful panoplia, kaleidoscope of panelists to discuss really an issue that is front of mind wherever you are in the world, that is COVID-19. So this recording is titled COVID-19 in 2021. And I'll just take a few moments to just explain what we're looking to achieve with this podcast. I'll start off by saying that the original take is really trying to express the original medicine perspective when it comes to health issues. We know that there is a traditional approach. We have an MD as a panelist today who can speak to that. But we really want to put forward the original medicine perspective very specifically as it comes to COVID, the issues that really are in the global conversation, and do it in an objective way as possible, and provide some questions that everybody who's listening can think about it and reflect for themselves whether there's validity in the points raised or not. Our objective is not to convince, it is not to argue to blindly and say you should do this, you shouldn't do this. We are here to really have two key objectives. The first is to provide information. We will be providing a list of our sources, our resources that individuals can go to after this call, after this recording, and they can look at for themselves and come to a conclusion and a judgment as to is there any value in what is being shared on this podcast? And the second thing we want to do is pose some questions that perhaps are not being asked in the global conversation that we feel should be. And that's really our two objectives. We don't want to do any more than that, but we want to do at least that. And we feel if we do that, we can bring a little bit of balance to the conversation as it stands at the moment. So everybody can make an informed decision, a reasoned, rational decision that takes into account both sides of the spectrum, both sides of the conversation. So that's our intention with this podcast. And I hope you enjoy it. So we'll start off by throwing over to Dr. Jim Sharps, who is the president of the International Institute of Original Medicine, just to give a brief background as to who we are. So you kind of have an idea of our perspective, where we're coming from, and the context from which we say what we say. We will then have a panel discussion covering some interesting themes and lenses of COVID, and I will let the panelists introduce themselves once we've had that introduction from Dr. Jim Sharp. So Dr. Jim, if I could ask you just to give a brief introduction to Iiom, who we are and what our mission and vision is.
Thank you, Seth. Well, IIOM stands for the International Institute of Original Medicine. It's a biblically based accredited school of natural health. We provide both certificate and degree programs, certified nutrition counselor, certified herbalist, certified medical missionary, and we provide everything from the bachelor's degree all the way through the master's, the doctorate, and recently the PhD program. We're the only accredited biblically based naturopathic program in the world that I'm aware of. And we do have the most integrated, the most comprehensive program. So that's where we are, and we're just about in the process of adding a new accredited certificate program on RBTI, which is the most powerful analytical tool known to man for analyzing health and vitality. And so you have the most powerful system known to man for preventing and reversing chronic degenerative diseases married to this analytical tool, which is a very powerful tool, which is designed to empower people to understand what their health status is and to make the appropriate diet, lifestyle, and original medicine improvements.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jim. And as Dr. Jim said, we are a Christian institution, so it would be amiss if we did not start this session and this recording with a word of prayer. Dr. Jim, if I could ask you to open us up as we start the session proper with a word of prayer.
Thank you. Let's bow our heads. Gracious Father, we praise you, we glorify your name. We thank you for all of your blessings. We come to you acknowledging without you we can do nothing, but with you all things are possible. So we invite you to be a part of this process, guiding, directing, and impressing us according to your purpose. We ask you to encamp your angels around all of the speakers, all of the attendees. And we're very confident that you will answer this prayer because we prayed in the very precious name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, our Savior, your Son, our very best friend, and the one and only Master Healer. Amen.
Amen. Okay, I'm just going to ask in 30 seconds. I'm not going to enforce it too ruthlessly, but somewhat ruthlessly. So I'll go to each of the panelists just to introduce themselves so you know where they're coming from, their perspective. And as the discussion morphs on, you can kind of see, okay, I can see where they're coming from, and there's some context for their words. Okay, I first see Tiffany. She'll tell you more about herself. So Tiffany, if I can throw over to you in 30 seconds, if you could just tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and your perspective.
Oh, sure. Well, I am so happy everyone is joining us tonight. My name is Tiffany Adams Kumalo. I'm the CEO here in Ocala, Florida of Nature's Wellness Care. And what we do here, we're an all natural like home health care. And we also do detoxification sessions. I'm a graduate of IIOM with my natural health practitioner degree. So I have my bachelor's in original medicine. And I became passionate on this subject because it hits me personally when it comes to mandates. I had to go through something years ago. And so I've done a bit of research and I know how to guide you in the right directions. I pray to help you research and educate yourself more in regards to this subject for tonight.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. And I didn't have a stopwatch timer on you, but it felt like 30 seconds, so congratulations.
It felt like it.
Okay, next person on my screen, Dr. Ivy French, if you can unmute yourself and give us a quick introduction.
Hi, I hail from Michigan, but I live in the mountains of North Carolina, and I have for many, many, many years. I have been in the world of wellness and natural healing for most of my life, so I won't tell you how many years that is. And I own a business called Center for Counseling and Integrative Health. My husband's a psychologist, so we just kind of team this together. I have a passion for Christ, but for natural healing as well. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. And that definitely felt under 30 seconds. So the bar is being set very high. I'll go next to Dr. Richard Ruling. If you could tell us a bit about yourself, Richard, just quickly unmute and see if you can set the bar any higher. Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm an MD who was planning to go to Africa, took public health in anticipation, but it didn't work out. The dean liked me and encouraged me to take internal medicine, cardiology, and come back and teach. I was an assistant professor of health science for 4 years before the dean had health issues. Several of the faculty left at that time. I put together a series of lifestyle programs, total health, how to eat and live well, 8 remedies basically from a perspective of exercise, et cetera, that brings health and helps the body to reverse disease. I am seeing that the Bible is far ahead of us today in terms of healthcare being true healthcare, not medical care. And look forward to sharing more when my opportunity comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruling. Okay, we do have one more panelist. I think there's a few technical issues. Lee Wellard. Hopefully he's able to join. If not, we will continue as is. Okay, so before we launch into the first area, I just wanted to give for the audience a bit of perspective on how we're looking to go through the sections. It's a lively discussion I'm sure we're going to have. We'll have one panelist to open up the section, and then we'll moderate the discussion between all the panelists. The first area we want to look at is really a historical perspective on this whole topic of vaccination, of COVID, of viruses, because we think that the foundation and the structure of a conversation is really important. The starting base assumptions, if you will, is really important when we're having a conversation that is as complex and has so many moving pieces as the conversation around COVID, around vaccinations, Tiffany mentioned around mandates and the impact of that. So Dr. Richard, if I may throw over to you for the first kind of points, in terms of the historical perspective that we're sitting in as it comes to viruses, as it comes to COVID and other kind of issues that we've had in history, to put COVID in a little bit of context.
Well, the context is in Isaiah 46, 10 or 12, that God said, "Who is like me, declaring the end from the beginning?" And I'm seeing that the Bible is ahead of us. All 5 references to physicians with an S are negative in context. The first one being Genesis 50, verse 2, when Israel or Jacob died, Joseph asked the physicians to embalm his father. Well, what does that tell you? They must be losing so many patients to their medical care that they also do the embalming. And lo and behold, today, the vaccinations have embalming fluid in them, formaldehyde, okay? So God declares the end from the beginning, and that's just one of 5 references to physicians, the last ones being in the New Testament with Christ, a woman with an issue of blood, and she spent all her money on physicians and was no better. But basically, today, bleeding issues from women also are a side effect, adverse effect, documented by the FDA in their online PDF, serious, one of the many adverse effects of the vaccination. And I will try not to, I don't want to get negative here so that they ban this program. So I'll refer to, you know what, when they, when I refer to that, you know what I'm talking about. But basically, even before we get to this COVID, I'm seeing that medical care has got problems, okay? It was 23 years ago that the JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, reported 106,000 deaths in hospitals under monitored conditions, and they blamed it on adverse drug events or reactions. The definition of that is a drug properly prescribed and administered. Was not an overdose, was not malpractice. It's commonly prescribed for that condition, but some people just react badly. And that event was in hospitals. 2 years later, the Western Journal of Medicine reported 199,000 deaths. So put them together, 305,000 deaths inside and outside the hospitals make medical care number 3 cause of death in around the year 2000, okay? But there was a 7-year study starting in 1998 to 2005 reported in the Archives of Internal Medicine, and they said that the death rate and adverse events went up, serious ones, 2.6-fold, the deaths went up 2.7-fold, and you do the math times 300,000, and you now have medical care as the number 1 cause of death in this country. I went through the US Senate offices with medical literature to show it until one senator said, you know, you're wasting your time. They own us. Speaking of donations to their reelection by the drug companies. So the total situation is they're not looking for answers. You know, they like what's happening, and they let the drug companies write Obamacare, et cetera, pretty much. So basically, to get back to original medicine, we really need, and I appreciate Hippocrates, father of medicine, said, let your food be your medicine. And I think that's what God did even way before Hippocrates from Eden. He picked the diet in Genesis 1, every herb bearing seed, every tree with fruit in itself, and so on. So basically, he said, if you eat and keep my statutes, I'll put none of those diseases of the Egyptians on you in Exodus chapter when they left Egypt. And I believe that Daniel did that when Christ said, when asked about the end of the world, he said, study the book of Daniel. And in the very first chapter, Daniel had to opt out of government health care. And we got to do the same coming up. I saw just within last night a pilot losing the mandates to get a vaccination, and him not wanting one. He said people struggled for freedom in this country. Millions have died for freedom, and we're disrespecting them if we make mandates and don't allow freedom of choice. And he was eloquent. I think some of us are too laid back, easy, but this pilot did not want a vaccine. And I've seen other a highway patrolman in the state of Washington, the fetal parts, fetal tissue being used in a vaccine. He was willing to lose his job for it. I think this is God bless him for it. I think we need to look at what the issues really are. And I'm seeing that the vaccinations, I just today, I was going for my jog. We have a hill behind us. At the juncture where the hill starts up, a car stopped, and I thought they were looking for directions. I stopped, and it was my neighbor. He asked how things are going. I said, "How are you?" He said, "Well, I just buried my brother 2 days ago." Okay. I said, he said he died of COVID. I said, "Did he have you know what?" And he said, "Yeah, he had it twice." Well, I said, he didn't die from COVID. He died from you know what. Basically, I think we need to understand that things are being covered up. A worldnetdaily.com had an article about a fellow, occupational therapist working in a nursing home, saw 32 people die after you know what. And they wouldn't take the story. It didn't make the news in Hawaii where he was working. That didn't fit their narrative that they wanted. They want to, government is pushing, and I think they want control, but we have to push back, I think, and stand up. I'm not saying push with guns, but I am saying push. We lack the push, and we're not seeing the science that is being muted, and people are losing their platforms on Facebook and Twitter and so on. I apologize and got mine back, but you got to be careful, basically. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know what my clock time is, but
no, thank you, Dr. Ruling.
Okay.
Really appreciate that. And so we'll jump into the discussion now in terms of, I think it's important as we jump in and we talk about terms like vaccination, we talk about terms like vaccine, COVID, virus. I think it's important we define our terms so we're all on the same page. If I could just very quickly invite Dr. Jim, just to help us frame these terms a little bit as we go into the discussion that Dr. Ruling has kind of laid especially a biblical perspective for us.
But that's a really good question, Seth. And the fact of the matter is the definition has changed over time. Up until just recently, a vaccination was some kind of agent, infective agent that they inoculated you with, so that you can create antibodies to it. So it wasn't so that you get the disease, but create antibodies. They've changed the definition recently to say that it can be some kind of genetic code, et cetera, to fit the new scenario that they have. See, back in the old days, they actually used what is called an attenuated virus. And then they used certain adjuvants to accelerate their action once you were injected with it, so that you can have this immune response. And as Dr. Ruling was kind of referring to it, there are a lot of those, like squalene and heavy metals and things of that nature, are toxic. Now, as I said, it's kind of genetic code. Vaccinations comes from the word vaka, which is the first kind of vaccinations was for cowpox or smallpox, when they noticed that milkmaids weren't getting the smallpox because they supposedly were being influenced by the viruses, and they were able to develop these antibodies. And so I'd just like to make a comment on what Dr. Ruling said. He did a very superb job in talking about where the whole thing started in Genesis 52. But in modern times, the whole concept of vaccinations came up in the 1600s. It was specifically people like Lister and Koch, but in particular, Antoine van Leeuwenhoek was a businessman, and he came up with this crude microscope, and he looked at pathological tissue, et cetera, and he saw all these little things running around. They called them animalcules, beasties, et cetera, tiny beasties. But then they said, those are the things that caused it. And so that's where that whole thing started. And so that whole concept of now we need to kind of develop a process for killing off these viruses. And that's where the whole vaccine thing started from. I see Dr. Ruling wanted to make a comment. So let me defer to you, Dr. Ruling, for a second. You need to put your sound on, though.
You're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much. Couple more things from the Bible. The pool of Bethesda in the Bible, John 5th chapter, was a vast throng of halt, lame, blind, impotent people. And they believed that the angel would trouble the waters and the first one in would get healed. Well, we have a pool of Bethesda today. NIH, National Institutes of Health, is in Bethesda, Maryland. And they pool our tax dollars for drug research, okay? And again, a vast throng of people, impotent, halt, blind, and so on, because they're depending on drugs to cure them, and they're not cured, okay? And they hope for a miracle and a stampede to get in, with the first cure. But people get trampled in stampedes from, we got a cure, basically. And then the fact that pharmakia is the Greek word that deceives all nations. In Revelation 18th chapter, we're called out of Babylon, for by her sorceries, bad translation is pharmacy, pharmakia, that deceives all nations. So that's my clue that, and if you can't tell if a patient is going to have an adverse drug event, and they're common, more common than you realize, I just say, I'll give you my personal example. My wife got a bladder infection. She went to her doctor. I was retired, not prescribing. He gave her an antibiotic, cured her infection 2 to 3 days. But a few months later, she had spots under her skin. She went to her doctor, did a blood test, called urgently the next morning, referring her to a hematologist who did a bone marrow. No platelets in the bone marrow. Did a splenectomy. Oops, still not cured. High steroids, gamma globulin, transfusions, in and out of hospitals, died of a stroke, okay? Oh, you always think it's going to happen to the other person, statistics. But sadly, God gave me a real life story to say that this is more common than people realize, and you always think it's going to be someone else, not me. But I just say we can beat these things with natural remedies, herbs, and so on. My wife just got a little impatient with the uva ursi, but I would just say we can do better. And the Bible is warning us, and it's worse now than ever at this point.
It is. Okay, thank you, Dr. Ruling. Dr. Ivy French, I know I saw your kind of inhaling breath. Do you have any kind of other perspectives in terms of framing the conversation that you want to kind of add in terms of definitions, or kind of some historical perspectives that we should be aware of as we kind of move in this conversation we're about to have?
Well, I think that we all have had very interesting discussions with our friends and family, unfortunately, close family at times, because there is such a dividing line. This is such a divisive topic always now, it seems. And I think that it's really important to remember, I think, you guys can tell me who said it, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So fighting over things or being right, I'm right and I'm going to beat my right into you, isn't always the answer. But standing, I think it is really important. I think it's everything. Standing for truth and for what's right is everything. So I have found myself in many conversations with people who are on the side of right in medicine. And I just quickly say to them, you do know there are two opinions on this, and you do know that there are hundreds and thousands of professionals, physicians, virologists, immunologists, I could go on both sides. And so you do have your opinion, and of course you have a right to your opinion. We live in America, at least I live in America. I have a right to mine and you have a right to yours, but yours isn't better than mine, because I have just as many or more professionals on my side, and that usually sets the tone. So it's not just one-sided. Those who feel like the people who are against the jab, as Dr. Ruling would say here, are crazy, in most cases, they're not going to change their mind. And so as Christians, as believers, taking a stance that's going to push them away is not the answer. But letting them know that you have researched and you have, I mean, I've listened to countless hours at this point of, you know, so many people, like I think that Dr. Artis was the one who, if you get on his site, over 100,000 doctors and professionals have stepped forward at this point against what is going on. I mean, they even say they have a recording of physicians and all over the world saying, we are not in a pandemic, and I refuse to take this vaccination, or even recommend my patients to take it. And so you clearly have two sides, and that's important for people to know. I think that doing our own research is key. Not listening to just one line. I mean, I've listened to both sides, actually. I have a hard time, well, I shouldn't say a hard time not chuckling from time to time when I listen to the side that doesn't agree with mine. You know, but in the beginning of this, so in March, I dealt with 2 COVID cases right away and treated them naturally, and had success. One was serious, one went into pneumonia. And so I got a firsthand taste of some of the more severe cases of it. Okay. But then I watched the numbers. You know, I know how to get on the government sites. I know how to watch the numbers. And I was like, what? You know, there's no numbers here that show a pandemic. I don't know what they're talking about. So once I reached that level, which was pretty quick, then I started watching, and then I started listening, and I started looking beyond the mainstream media to see who else was talking, and if I was the only one that was, because if I'm the only one saying that, you know, maybe something's wrong, you know. But then of course more and more voices came forward, and I dug to look. I looked at the VAERS site. I watched several different sites on the CDC, you know, and then I listened to multiple people, professionals, talking about this. And so, and from that point, so it's more than a year later, and my opinion has not changed. But you can look just as well as I can look. See, don't depend on what I'm saying. Don't depend on what Dr. Ruling is saying. Listen, pray about it. Ask the Holy Spirit to speak, you know, and dig to make your own decisions. But most of the stuff is right out in the open. And Dr. Ruling has something to say, so I'll.
Thank you, Dr. French. Just before you come in, Dr. Ruling, I think one thing I wanted to really emphasize around that point, Dr. French, that you make is very important, is one that we must dig. In today's modern day and age, there is an overflow of a deluge of information, and often truth, as we would define it, is very rarely found in one place. And the work that has to be gone through to really piece the truth together is really important. And it's work. It's not something you can just have a download and it just goes into your brain and that's it. And that real critical thinking, I think in today's society, because there is so much information, it's increasingly hard to know, how do I trust this source? There are so many sources, how do I prioritize them? And I think that's a challenge when we come to something with an important weight, as we are talking about with a virus, responses to said virus. We really do need to emphasize the need to really dig and search, that it's not easy and you have to often go to different sources. Dr. Rubin, I know I did see your hand, but I wanted to throw over to Tiffany just to give us a perspective here, because I know in terms of the framing of the conversation, Tiffany, are there any kind of points that you just want to bring out in terms of, okay, are there any terms that we need to define? Are there any base issues that we just need to throw into the discussion before we move into more specifics?
Well, I think they covered it all very beautifully. I like how Dr. French, you know, she said to let people have their, because I know what she means, why she says sometimes you have to stop yourself from chuckling. And what I do want to say is, if it's something that you sincerely believe in, stick to your sincere religious beliefs. If it's something that you do not want to do, don't let anyone coerce you, harass you. Stick to what you believe in, and you never know who you're empowering. That's what I actually had an issue today. Well, it wasn't really an issue, but an example today at a school my son is going to be attending. And the lady, she came off quite hostile. She said that my son, you know, he probably will be mandated to have to take the jab. I'll just do this, the jab, in order to do clinicals. He's going to school for physical therapy. And I told her, well, my son has religious exemptions and things of that nature. He's had it since the 7th grade. And oh man, she just started snapping right off the back. Long story short, I educated her and I sent her to different websites and links. She gave me her email. At the end of it, she was so happy. So we have to educate ourselves so we have the right verbiage when we're dealing with people. And you never know what they're going through. At the end of it, she said she feels harassed at work. She feels like she's going to have to quit her job, all sorts of things. And she was so relieved. So I just want to say, stick to your religious beliefs. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of a sound mind. So that's what I want to add on to that topic right there.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. And I think it's really important that we have that grounding. And I think that grounding and that confidence to stand doesn't come when we just stand and we just, I'm standing here and a friend comes, friend, why are you standing there? I don't know, I'm just standing here. It's really important to do that work, to dig, to find out, okay, I'm standing here, but why am I standing here? Can I articulate why I'm standing here? All of these things are really crucial as we go through this conversation, and we have to explain our perspective to others. Okay, Dr. Ruling, I really do need that to be under a minute so we can move on with the conversation as it is.
Well, basically, we're comparing apples and oranges. Most people eat poorly and they can get sick. The flu comes after the holidays, cookies, cakes, candies, and so on. And sugar lowers the immune system. But when I was working emergency room, I got the flu one night, getting sick, no temperature, no fever to fight this thing. They taught us in medical school, fever helps kill the virus. Well, I filled the tub with very hot water, hot as I could stand. 20 minutes, I had a fever of 102.5. And as the water was running out, I poured cold water front and back several times. It will double the white blood count. Twice as many immune cells to fight the bug, okay? And I felt pretty good. I didn't eat any supper. I wanted those white cells very hungry, no sugar or anything. And I saw my patients till about 11 o'clock when I took a second treatment. In the morning, I had no scratchy throat, no runny nose, no achiness, it was all gone, okay? I was well. And I think most people today, Daniel opted out for a plant-based diet, if you read it in Daniel 1, and the British Medical Journal shows a plant-based diet gave 568 healthcare workers 73% less severity. Don't we want less severity? Plant-based can do it, along with no sugar, etc. And the hydrotherapy. Battle Creek did it, okay? And we have lost all of that in our effort to be modern science. Bad situation, I think. Thank you for the minute.
That felt like under a minute, Dr. Ruling, but thank you for that point. And I think it's very, it's critical to, again, understand, and I see the hand, Dr. French, and that discussion. It's really critical to understand how the body works. So I'll go to Dr. French, and then the question I want to just throw out to the panel before we kind of close this framing element of the conversation. The question I want to throw out to the panelists, you have a few minutes while Dr. French gives her next comment. How exactly does the body respond when the COVID-19 virus is inside? We've heard terms thrown around like cytokine storms. I just wanted to throw out to the panelists, what is actually happening in the body as the body deals with the COVID-19 virus? So I'm just going to throw that question out there before we move on. Dr. French, you had a comment.
I do. I just wanted to say, I said digging was really important. But I didn't say one of the places we all should be digging is the Word of God. Because as Dr. Ruling said, and I've known this for a long time, in Revelation 18:23, it spells it right out. If we read that and understand that pharmakia is the real word and not sorcery, we know what's coming. But even more so, we have been given a diet in the Old Testament that will keep us well, that will keep us from disease, it says. And we were given counsel 150 years ago on what we should be eating and what we should be doing in the 8 natural laws of health right before Christ comes in order to keep the disease away. And so we have what we need. And many of us know, many of us don't know, but need to learn. A lot of the people that know aren't doing it. And I have to say, I have picked up my resolve to do what I need to do because of the disease around me and because of the promises that God gave us through his word. Anyway, we need to be studying the word.
Thank you, Dr. French. If I can, just a few before we kind of move on to the next. I think the framing is really important. So perhaps Dr. Jim, if I could throw this over to you. When COVID is in the body, what is the process? What is happening as the body deals with that foreign pathogen, with that foreign virus, with that foreign entity? And what's actually happening, just so we can have that in our minds as we move forward with the conversation?
That's a very powerful question. And the answer is based on individual requirements and capacities, or individual capacities in this particular case. If you notice, even a lot of these so-called positive COVID carriers are asymptomatic. I think, and we talk about Christians standing tall. I think people, regardless of what your religious background is, just from a personal standpoint, from a human standpoint, we need to kind of act like rational human beings and think these things through. So even the medical infrastructure is saying that they're claiming that you might have this virus, but everybody isn't symptomatic. So what is happening is, first of all, a virus is a dead entity. It cannot replicate on its own. It only can replicate in a live host. So why isn't everybody being infected the same way? Well, the reason is there's 3 issues involved: dose, how much you're exposed to, duration, and susceptibility. And so to answer your question, let's focus just on the susceptibility issue. So if it comes in, for most people, the body's immune system can handle it. That's why right from the beginning, I was saying the most powerful PPE is a strong immune system. And even now, they're saying, well, the masks really don't work. There's no studies that show that it works. A virus is the smallest entity known to man. It's smaller than a bacteria. It's measured in nanometers. And wearing a mask is like trying to keep a fly out of a chain link fence. It comes in not only through the nostrils, the mouth, it comes in through the eyes, the ears, etc. So it really doesn't make sense. So to answer your question, that's an individual thing. I like what Hippocrates said. Now, Hippocrates wasn't a world-class Christian, but he said, instead of studying diseases and disease processes, we should study the people who get diseases. So it's not an automatic that you're being exposed to it. We're exposed to it. There are more bacteria and viruses in our body than there are cells. So they're very small. And so the point is, what is your body's ability to be able to handle it? So the issue of susceptibility is important. So can viruses cause issues? Yes, if you get a high dosage for a long duration, it can replicate itself to the point, but it's not the virus is causing the issue. It's all of that toxin. And if there's a lot of waste material, so viruses can only live where there's waste material. So if there's a lot of waste material in the body, that's where you have these problems. And if you're noticing, a lot of people that are dying, they have what they call pre-existing conditions. So it's basically that susceptibility issue and the amount of toxins. And so if there's an environment for their proliferation, and then you get even more sick from the toxins from all of those viruses from their proliferation. So the thing I want to leave you with is this whole notion of dose, duration, and susceptibility. So it's not going to be the same thing for everybody. So it's based on individual capacities.
Thank you, Dr. Sharps. And just one follow-up question. I do see the hand, Dr. Ruling. One follow-up question. You mentioned diet. How important is diet and nutrition in terms of building up the immune system, and what effect can a poor diet have in terms of the immune system's response to COVID and the severity of the symptoms?
Is that question to me too?
Yes.
Yes, well, diet is absolutely important. That's what is creating the internal environment. Your diet is what determines how well your body works. It basically talks about the integrity of the system. And so the more integrous your diet is, your diet and your lifestyle for that matter, the more powerful your immune system is. So your immune system needs certain substances, etc. We're created from the dust. And from that dust, all of those minerals are there, which is what creates the integrity of the organs, etc. And the best sources for sustaining this dust that we're made from after we were made from dust and we breathe, and that life was breathed into us, is from a plant-based source. So if you're getting all of that and you're getting a good diet, you're getting the water, high water content diet, because you need the water to transport the nutrients to the cells and to pull the toxins out. So diet is extremely important for creating that internal environment, which reduces your susceptibility. So diet is extremely important in terms of creating that terrain for developing that powerful immune system, this powerful PPE that I like to refer to.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sharps. Did any panelists have a last comment before we move on to the next section? First hand wins. I think Dr. Ruling is just there, Dr. French, unfortunately. Dr. Ruling, go ahead.
I wanted to address the cytokine storm. It's a result of the mRNA vaccine that creates proteins, spike proteins, that can embed on endothelial inside the blood vessel wall. It can go in different organs and create blood clots in the brain, in the heart, in the kidneys, and so on. So that the animal studies, NIH released a report that the vaccine failed those studies. We're the lab rats now at this point because of what they call ADE, antibody dependent enhancement. If you were to Google ADE or antibody dependent enhancement and put NIH, you could probably find the study in which that they had lots of references, but reference 75 and 81, the lab animals died. And so we don't want to be experimental, but we have no long-term results. I was taught by Dr. Harding at Loma Linda that drug companies never do long-term studies. They don't want to know the results of long-term stuff. It's bad news. Basically, they might have to report it. And I would just say the cytokine storm is a subacute thing that takes place probably in humans after 3 months. This is what another doctor said. And so if people get the vaccine, they feel pretty good, and they're alive a week later, they feel fine. Well, actually, the definition of vaccination is they're going to wait 2 months before they consider them vaccinated. And anybody that dies from the shot, if you die 0 to 14 days after a shot, you died from COVID. You didn't die from the shot. Hello, how can they say you died from COVID when you had the shot and died within 2 weeks? But by definition, you weren't vaccinated yet. You haven't been fully vaccinated. That is a real twist, in my opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Ruling. Dr. French, I see you. We'll go very quickly before we move on to the next segment.
I just wanted to piggyback on Dr. Sharp's statement because one of the things that I would say to my clients for years now is to watch the ticks, the upticks in the flu season. They always happen right after Halloween, right after Christmas, right after Valentine's Day, and even a little bit right after Easter. What do those 4 things have in common? Large amounts of sugar intake, right? And so then I hear Dr. Fauci just like in the last couple of days say, oh, but it's okay to do Halloween this year because, we don't want to deprive those kids of their candy. And I'm saying, what? No, we have to pay attention of what sugar does to our white blood cells, and our white blood cells, of course, are our killers. And so, yeah, diet is a lot. It's everything. Not everything, but almost everything.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? I'm kind of asking on behalf of people who may not know, just going into the practical specifics, Dr. French. What effect does sugar have on the immune system? When we have high amounts of sugar, what actually is happening to our immune system, and why is that causing those spikes that you kind of observed in your comments?
Well, so I can tell you the same way that I tell my students to help them understand, and don't laugh at me, but what I say is just picture in your body that you have an army called white blood cells, and they have their gear up and they're ready to fight anything that comes in, and they're all ready. But when you take sugar in, it's almost like getting them drunk, and they just say, hey, look, what is that? Oh, hi. Instead of fighting, they just go to sleep and have a good time, and they don't do their job. And that's really basic for you. I'm sure Dr. Ruling could put it in better terms, but those are the terms that my students understand. We just put our white blood cells to sleep, and they don't do their jobs.
The average American gets about 35 teaspoons of sugar a day, and that's enough to wipe out the phagocytic index, keeping it from 100% to about 25% most of the day.
Thank you, Dr. Ruling. So just as we wrap up this first kind of framing segment, I think it's important that we understand that the terms, the historical context for the conversation we're in is extremely important. So we will be providing, if you are interested and you've heard themes that have come up, sources referred to, we will be releasing kind of a help list of sources that have been put together by the panelists, so you can go for yourself. Do not take our word for what we're saying. Go and search. That's important, to use your mind, to reason for yourself. Don't take anybody's opinion as gospel. Go and search, go and verify on both sides of the conversation. We're having a conversation here trying to bring balance against the kind of more mass media perspective, but don't take our word for it. But at the same token, just because somebody's on CNN and they have a lot of letters after their name, don't take their word for it either. Go and verify, look at the sources on both sides, and reason and come to a conclusion. And that's really important. The second main summary point as we move into the next section is really to understand history. If you're a student of history, there are many pitfalls that you can see ahead in the journey we're in. If you fail to look and recognize and respect the value of history, we're going to repeat the same mistakes that we have repeated for generations and generations. So that concludes. I see the hands, and we do need to move on, unfortunately. I do see the hands. We'll move on to the second section. Dr. French, we've talked about some of the terms. We've talked about framing. We've talked about some of the historical perspectives. Why is it important to really know why you stand where you stand, not just saying I have a position, whether that be I want to have the jab, I don't want to have the jab? How can we approach establishing our position as it comes to COVID?
Well, I think that I've already stated some of that, in that we need to do our research on our own. So if we don't have a firm position in what we believe, several things happen. One, we're easily swayed, and those who use the methods of manipulation to try to get people to do things are going to prey on the people who don't have a firm stand. If you don't know why you believe what you believe, you will be easily swayed by those who wish to manipulate you. So that's one of the things. Another really important reason is because for your own stress level, your own peace of mind, if inside you don't really know why you've taken a stand, you're going to deal with a lot of stress if you aren't already. I would guess that you are already, because this is a stressful environment that we're living in right now, because of the pressures of jobs. It is a huge deal for many to lose their job because of a stand. So if you don't know why you're taking a stand, are you gonna lose your job because of a stand that you don't know why you're taking? You understand? On the other hand, if you don't understand the implications of taking the jab, it could ruin your life. And it has ruined many lives, even onto death so far. And so this is no little deal. This is a big deal. We see, I'm not sure if you want me to go into this, but in families, okay, we have families that are on both sides of this aisle here. And what do you do about that? I mean, I know that in our practice, we're seeing a lot of stress and a lot of family angst because people are taking different sides and living in the same house. Some are getting the jab. I mean, married couples. I have, very close family members where the wife has taken it and the husband hasn't. And she wasn't going to, but she was out with her friends, okay, and they wanted to talk her into it. And so as she started to sway, they said, "We'll walk you to Walgreens right now." And they took her anyway. So we now have two people. And what does that mean? Well, we understand that there is shedding going on, and we understand, and there'll be references to this, but even in Pfizer's own trial documentation, which I have a copy of here, they make reference to the shedding that they knew was going to happen of the spike proteins from the people who got the jab to the people who didn't. And it's not that they get COVID, but they get spike proteins that will go to their organs. And we've seen a lot of women and it going to, the reproductive organs and causing bleedings and even miscarriages when they haven't had it. And so it's really important to pay attention to those things. And I'm not saying, divorce isn't the answer, but the latest that I've read is that 2 months of shedding. And so I would recommend keeping a safe distance for 2 months if you don't want to get that spike protein shedding going on. So there are parents and kids. I mean, the whole situation is, and you also have to take into consideration that you want peace and harmony in your home. And so you don't want to get hateful about it, especially if they've already gotten it, right? What good is it going to do to shame at that point? But just say you have your opinion and I have my opinion and I love you, but I need to keep my distance until you're through that stage, at least the stage we know. There's not been enough studies done to know exactly what's going on. But anyway, so important. Those are important issues that we see a lot of people facing right now.
Well, thank you, Dr. French. And if I can throw a question out to the panelists, in terms of the scientific validity of the, can I put this, those that are reluctant to get the vaccine, is there a scientific basis for their position, or is it just kind of, it's you can just put them all in a box of conspiracy theorists, and actually there's, if you take the mainstream media view, that there's a lot of very good science behind the vaccine. So is that the case? Or Dr. Ruing, perhaps as the medical doctor on the panel, you could perhaps speak to the scientific basis for not wanting to take the jab.
Thank you very much. The FDA a year ago, interestingly, a date October 22, which is meaningful to Seventh-day Adventists, but for a Day of Atonement, they released a surveillance of the adverse effects of the vaccine, and it's a huge list. Guillain-Barré, which is a paralysis, neurological. First 8 or 9 things were neurological. Myocarditis, heart, blood clots, and et cetera. Autoimmune and death at the head of the second list, by the way. But who sees it? It's on a PDF online, page 17, and the government isn't promoting that. They're promoting the shot. Okay, they want to control everybody, I think. And I think we need to stand up against control, against mandates, and over my dead body, like Daniel was willing to die, basically, in first chapter, but he opted out. And I believe God will bless us if we try to courteously be nice. We don't take guns to fight them, but this is not what I can do at this point. My body is God's temple. He'll have to, I pray that you won't offend him by doing something to me. I don't know how to say it, but I'm saying that, and in history, by the way, we talk, you wanted a historical background. In the Dark Ages, the bubonic plague, the Black Death, was killing whole villages, but other villages were spared when they discovered the quarantine basis in Leviticus 13th chapter. And my point is that we have done a reverse quarantine. The devil is laughing at us. He locks down everybody, not just the sick people. And the economy has been blown to shreds because we've run against the Bible in how it says to do it. And we've suffered the loss and we're going down. God says in Jeremiah 30, verse 11, he's going to make a full end of all other nations. America is not accepted. We're starting down now. We'll never be the same as far as I'm concerned. I believe end is not far.
Thank you, Dr. Ruling. Dr. Sharps, you had a comment.
Yes, the specific question you asked, from a historical perspective, is there any real science behind the vaccination, behind infectious disease, et cetera? And the answer is absolutely no. There's more, apparently there's more politics and economics involved in this issue than there is science. If you look at it from a scientific perspective, every single vaccination that has ever come out, there's always a bell curve. And viruses in particular have something called a limited life. And we kind of referred to it in different ways. And you heard Dr. French talk about how, it kind of spikes, it goes up, it plateaus, and then it goes down. Every single vaccine, don't take my word for it. Look at the facts. You have this epidemic, it goes up, it plateaus, it comes down. Every single vaccination has come in when it was almost completely ended. And I'm talking about smallpox, measles, etc. And a lot of these breakouts that you're seeing happen, they're happening in vaccinated areas. It's so much so that when the smallpox vaccine came out, the only increases that they had was among the vaccinated people. Now, people don't look at history. They're not looking at science. And so they're looking at these pundits, these experts, and even when I've talked to some of them, and they don't even know this historical perspective. They really believe that there is a science and that it does work, but it's never been demonstrated. There's never been a peer-reviewed study that basically showed vaccinations versus a control group. And you heard the bubonic plague, for example, would solve that. It had nothing to do, it had less to do with quarantine than what it did was they cleaned up the environment. They got rid of the rats and they cleaned up. And I agree with this reverse quarantine that exists. But going back to the central point, see, I'm an original medicinist. If you're focusing on original medicine and not focusing on the news and are focusing on all the theories, and you get your body right, the likelihood of you getting COVID, getting any backdrop from any shedding or any of that, you're more likely to be hit by lightning on a sunny day. So the key is not to get confused by all of the noise out there. Get focused on you, your maker, and this. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And if we take care of this body, we don't have to worry about science. We don't have to worry about any of these things. Even the cytokine storm, it doesn't happen to everybody. It happens to people with pre-existing conditions. So if you take care of the body temple, you don't have to worry about any of these things. Let people argue back and forth, the science, this, that, and the other thing. And as I said, the most powerful PPE, when I do my presentation, I have this person in this lab suit from head to toe and worried about some little tiny virus. And you don't need to worry about if you have a strong immune system. The Bible says that you can't You can't get into a strong man's house unless you break in and steal, etc. So you get that strong immune system. This little virus doesn't have a prayer. And so we're focusing on the wrong thing. We're focusing on viruses. We're focusing on this, that, and the other thing, when we should be focusing on us and our relationship to our maker and putting this body back the way it was designed to be. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And going back to your question about diet, lifestyle, and original medicine, that's what we should be focusing on, not all of these other peripheral things. And that is the most powerful way of weathering this storm. And at the same time, you know, you want to maintain your sense of conscience and your sense of integrity and your sense of being strong with all of this going around. But that's what I want to focus on. The whole issue boils down to individual requirements and capacities. You take care of the individual, you don't have to worry about all of this other noise.
Thank you, Dr. Sharps. Just a quick question again. I'm asking on behalf of those that are listening that may not be so au fait with the terms we're using. The term shedding was referred to earlier. Perhaps could we just define that a little more for those that aren't aware of that as a term?
Yes. Well, a lot. What is happening is the most the people who are causing a lot of the issues they're saying are the vaccinated people. So they're creating the shedding, and they're even saying now the vaccinations that. At first, they were saying, take the vaccinations to prevent it. Now they're saying, take it so that you won't have to mitigate the symptoms. And so the shedding is now these people who are vaccinated, they're shedding these particles because this is we don't even know about this whole thing. This is a whole new technology. It's not an attenuated virus. They're using RNA and they're using other particles and this coding to put into the body so that you can have an immune response. So it's not necessarily to cure or prevent anything, but to have this response. And we don't know what those long-term results. So I agree with Dr. Ruling, Dr. French, 3 months down the road, and sometimes it's just 2 to 3 hours, but it could be 2 to 3 years. We don't know what's happening in the system. So that shedding is happening by a lot of these vaccinated people. I'm not worried about it. I don't care what they call it. If I'm taking care of if I'm not taking care of my body temple, if I'm not getting enough sleep, if I'm not eating right, I need to worry about everything. I need to worry about every single boogeyman. I can tell you from my personal standpoint, with all this hand washing and gloving, I haven't washed my hands not one more time than I usually do. So I'm not worried about touching this and touching that if I'm taking care of the body temple. And most of us, nobody is talking about the body temple. They're giving too much credit to the strength and power of the virus as opposed to the power of this fearfully and wonderfully made body that God has made us, and going back to the original design.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharps. Dr. French, I think you originally brought up the issue of shedding. Did you want to have a final comment on that before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that shedding is actually a term that is used with all vaccinations, because when people get a vaccination, they have a live virus in their body, they actually can shed even the measles for the first, I think, 3 days. That's what I understand. This is from research that I've done about 22 years ago. And I think that because this isn't a live virus, one of my first questions was, well, how can they shed if it's not a live virus? But I guess what's going on is the mRNA is the communicator. It's not a part of the DNA strand, but it's the communicator of the DNA. And what's going on is it's actually turning our cells into little factories that are creating spike proteins. And somehow, and maybe Dr. Ruling can explain this, those spike proteins can come out of us. And I listened to one doctor who said, honestly, we don't know how. We know it's close proximity. So he said, we aren't sure whether it's the breath. We aren't sure whether it's the skin. They think it could be the skin. It might be sexual contact. They just don't know. There's so much we just don't know, but they do know that we are seeing the results of people getting groupings of spike proteins when they haven't had it, but they are in close proximity to somebody who has. But that's what shedding is not a new term; it's an older term.
Yeah, and just to clarify the point I was making, it doesn't matter. We've been shedding since the beginning of time. And so we're getting confused with all of this terminology and giving it too much, we're giving it too much airtime. We shed all the time. We've been shedding all kinds of things, and we're very good at seeing what we're looking for. So we're looking for these shedding, but there's a lot of other cofactors that are going on that we're not even looking at, or the so-called elephant in the room.
I agree completely with you. I just want to say that, Dr. Sharps, I think the focus totally needs to be on the terrain, as it was termed over 100 years ago, on our bodies and what God has given us as far as knowledge on how to keep our bodies and our immune system strong to fight. That's the key. Totally agree.
And I also encourage everyone to research the creator of the mRNA terminology. I think what is his name? Robert Malone, Dr. Robert Malone. Okay. Yes. So really research him. He's talking all over the world in regards to that technology. So I highly recommend everyone do their research on Dr. Robert Malone. He's the creator of the mRNA technology.
Okay, Dr. Ruling, if you could have a final comment, please, on definition of shedding.
Not on shedding specifically, but I want to say that every Christian knows John 3:16, God so loved the world, he gave his only son, but nobody is thinking about 2 verses earlier. Verse 14 says, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man. Well, there are 2 snakes now on the stick, okay? The medical caduceus has 2 snakes, and this is Satan's crowning masterpiece. It's really Rand Paul, a senator, called for an investigation of Fauci because he funded a gain of function for a virus that was transferred from North Carolina to Wuhan, China. And this is really a bioweapon, and it's the RNA is a masterpiece that isn't very good because it changes my immune system. And I won't be able, it might initially give me a better response, just like a drug relieves the symptoms, but in the long run, your immune system is crippled. The natural killer cells that monitor viruses and tumors and so on aren't there. They're not doing their job. Ryan Cole, MD, board certified pathologist, has seen a 20-fold increase in endometrial cancer and 20-fold increase in papilloma viruses, et cetera. So we're in trouble for the people who've had the shot. They haven't seen it yet, but another doctor, a presidential physician, said millions are going to die, and I believe that's true. And this is part of what. Well, I won't. There's not much last time. I've spent my time. So thank you very much. I'll let you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruling. Okay, we've mentioned it very briefly before. We'll move on the conversation because I know a lot of people are spending a lot of time thinking about this topic, and it's the topic of mandates. So it's the topic of, okay, I'm now in a workplace. My employer is telling me that I need to really have this response to the COVID virus. And if I don't have this government mandated response, my job is at risk. Tiffany, I'll throw this one to you. In terms of the conversation about mandates, in terms of the conversation about how COVID is impacting our working lives, what do you have to say on that?
Oh, well, this has hit me personally. I was personally threatened with my son that he had to be mandated. This has been about almost 10 years now. And I took him into the pediatrician, and he was going to the 7th grade at the time. And they had a series of shots. I can't remember which ones they were, but I questioned them. I just asked the question. I wanted to know more about them. He had just done his wellness check, and he told me he was doing great. And then he comes out with all these shots. And so I started questioning because I was just educating myself a little bit in regards to shots. That's how I'll term it. And he got so angry with me. He said, you ask too many questions. You know, you're always coming in here and you're asking so many questions, Tiffany, and I can't understand. And just go to the CDC if you want. And I said, well, I'm asking you. He said, well, if you do not get this series of shots, then he will not be able to go to school. He's not going to be able to go. They won't let him in. Long story short, he kicked us out of the office. Before that, I asked him, did he give shots to his children? I knew them quite well for many years. And he tripped up and he said, well, no, you know, that's what he told me. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And so my nephew and my son was in there and they're looking like, wow, what is going on right now? So the nurse, she pats me before I leave because I'm distressed. I mean, my goodness, this is mandated. Like it must be important, but I just need to know more. And I felt so intimidated and so helpless. And she pat me on my shoulder and she said, you're doing the right thing. Oh boy, did that open up a world of investigating Tiffany. So I went down the road of searching and I found out about religious exemptions. And so that is what I want to share with everyone here. I'm going to do it very quickly because it's not that hard. God blessed us with the Constitution and it's in our favor. The law is on your side. And so I am using my mobile device. So I'm not sure. I'm just going to ask a question. If everyone here is aware or know about Title VII. I don't know, Seth, if you can tell me, if you see any hands up or in the chat, tell me, yes, I know about Title VII. Title VII is definitely on everybody's side. And no, you don't know? Okay, yes, someone says yes. No, okay, I see. Well, we're gonna do a quick little lesson on Title VII right now. Everyone has a search engine, whether you use Google, Ecosia, DuckDuckGo. I would recommend you use DuckDuckGo or Ecosia because they're not compromised as Google has been, but you can use Google. I have it right here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but I'm just going to read that first sentence of Title VII. And it says, Title VII prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. So it prohibits any discrimination against race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. So I was like, wow. So I want you to know that is a federal. Religious exemptions are federal exemptions, and no state or no company can create a law that violates federal law. They can't, once you give them a religious exemption, stick to your religious beliefs. This is my sincere religious belief, and I'm sticking to that. Don't let them take you in the office. I'm hearing all kinds of different things of they're taking people into the offices and they're doing meetings and coercing people and threatening. Then that becomes a violation of your work environment. It's a hostile work environment, and that's illegal as well. So stick to your religious beliefs. Now, if you want to do medical exemptions, that's something totally different. But religious exemptions, they are forever. You don't have to keep going in there with documentation and all of these things. Now, if you want something to refer to in regards to that, the EEOC, which stands for the Equal Educational Commission, Employment Commission. Let me verify that. The EEOC, Equal Employment. Go ahead.
Occupational Commission.
There you go, Occupational Commission. Go to that site, and it's section 12, I believe, and they have it all outlined there about your religious rights. Everything is there, so they can't keep harassing you about documentation. I see someone said that their religious exemption was denied. I want to appeal to you to send an appeal. You can send an appeal and fight that. Let me look. I'm using my mobile device, so I'm trying to keep up in the chat there. If it was denied, you are entitled to appeal that religious exemption. I am also going to give everyone a website link here for a phenomenal speaker. She's a legal educator in regards to this subject. She's so good. I wish I knew her back then when I had to like fight through libraries and stuff. But her name is Peggy Hall. Go to thehealthyamerican.org. She has forms there. She has videos there, and everything that you need to give to your employers. You don't even have to speak. And there's a free 90-minute webinar. I believe it's like 90 minutes, and it explains everything in detail. It is against the law to mandate. Mandates are not laws. Thank you, Seth. That is the website right there, thehealthyamerican.org. Mandates are not laws. And I want everybody to remember that. Even to get tested constantly, that's against your sincere religious belief. To alter anything into your body, you do not have to be mandated to do these weekly testings. You do not have to be mandated to alter your face, to wear a muzzle all day. That is against the law as well. Did you know a mask is considered a medical device? So no job is supposed to be mandating that you put a medical device over your face for extended periods of time. I also want to stress to be very careful when it comes to making these choices, when it comes, if you have children, because they are coming after the children with this. And I've seen 2 cases just recently. It was recently. The parents have little ones. I think they're under the age of 1 year old. And all they did was ask questions in a hospital setting. Be very careful when it comes to denying certain things that the government deems to be important or what you should be doing for your child. I want to say it right because I don't want us to get censored and things. But I would highly recommend that you surround yourself with doulas, midwives, and different people that have the lingo when you're saying no to these different mandates when it comes to because they have gotten their children taken away just for simply asking a question. And it's very serious. And now they're having to fight the courts. Some of them got their banks, their money seized. And it's causing a lot of trauma for the families and for these children, and it's very serious. So now when I see their cases, it hits home because I did the same thing almost 10 years ago with my son. I just asked the question and I could have been in the same boat as them. So if you have children, is Title VII applicable in Canada? I am not sure about Canada. I know this is for the US Constitution, but I can look that up. Or if anyone else on the panel knows about for Canada, I'm not sure, but that's a very good question.
No, that's United States.
Yeah, I think to be on the safe side,
States only.
I think to be on the safe side, just to clear ourselves, Title VII in the Constitution, we're talking the context of the United States.
Yeah.
Each country has its own legislative code. Here in the UK, the code is different. The rules around religious exemptions are different. So I just keep that in mind for those that are listening. Different countries have different legal codes. It's very important that you, again, as we've just said in the earlier part of the discussion, take the time to do the research. It's not easy. It's not always pleasant. It's vitally important to know the legal grounding on which you stand so you can be confident in your position. Tiffany, if I may, thank you for giving us that introduction. One practical question again, asking on behalf of those listening. What do you do if you're threatened with being fired? You know, you've done your religious exemptions, you've appealed, denied, and it's like, sorry, you're gone, you're out. You take clear out your desk. What do you do?
That's a very good question. Do not quit. Don't quit your job. If they are threatening you and saying, hey, listen, you know, if you don't do this, then we're going to fire you. Let them fire you. Because if you quit, then you cannot sue. So don't let them fire you. Do everything in writing. Don't do verbal conversations in these meetings. Let them give you everything in writing. Tell them to give you, if they're going to fire you, then they need to give you a letter. Put everything in writing so that you have that if you have a legal case for the future. But you don't want to do anything verbal in their offices because they're going to try to trip you up. Some of these lawyers are actually reaching out to employers to help them harass their staff. So it's really horrible. You know, you don't even want to really deal with stuff like that. But if you feel the need to want to stay there and fight, then you do just that. You do just that. You stay there, don't comply. You don't have to give reason for your religious exemption. This is your religious belief, and you do not have to quit. Don't quit. Let them fire you and let them put everything in writing. Go do your homework. I want everyone to binge watch this weekend. No Netflix. Go on YouTube and watch all of those videos from The Healthy American and educate yourself. It's powerful. It's powerful, powerful videos to help you in regards to this matter because it's very scary and they can seem very intimidating. I felt very intimidated by the doctor when he was treating me that way, but I was a mother and I had questions, and you have rights. God gave us rights, and we are to study for ourselves, study to show thyself approved. Don't take my word for it. Go look it up for yourself. Everything is there. Everything is outlined, and don't be scared. And if you're not well verbiaged on it, you don't know how to say it, that's okay, because she teaches you there on that website. And she also has like a sheet line. It's not even long, and it shows you how to write your religious exemption. So I want everyone to do that for their homework. Binge watch those videos. It will help you tremendously. I'm telling you, she's a blessing.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Tiffany. You have to jump in and move the conversation on. Dr.
Okay.
Ruling and then Dr. French.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw a question about can we have a right to turn down the test? I would turn down the test because they can make false positives. In fact, recently it was removed. It can't even distinguish from the common flu to the COVID. So the CDC was removing it, but it's being used everywhere and to justify hospitalization, et cetera. And they get big bucks for COVID cases, et cetera. 3 times as much if he on a respirator for with a COVID diagnosis than a non-COVID diagnosis.
That's right.
There was a question that somebody had about what if my local church does not support me? How can I have a religious exemption? The Bible is the basis of a religious exemption. If you say I feel that God does not want me to, this is my religious conviction, you got it, and stand by it. Like she said, you don't have to have your church stand behind you. Half of them are wrong or more.
Yep. And I'll say that was very good point. And I'll say also in the law, it does not state that you have to belong to a denomination. It says your religious belief. So you don't have to belong to any congregation. It's your right. It's your sincere belief as a person. It's your body and it's your choice. And you don't have to explain that to them. So they have to accommodate. That's what the law says. Accommodate you reasonably in order for you to keep your job. If they don't, then hey, we'll just take the next steps.
Thank you, Tiffany. I just wanted to stress one quick point here in terms of mandates. And Dr. French, I see your hand. I will come to you next. And I just, again, want to just stress the emphasizing on people to do their groundwork. I'm looking at this from a practical perspective. The threat of or the possibility of losing your job is not something to take lightly. Do not take Tiffany's word for it. Do not take Dr. Ruling's word for it. Do not take my word for it. Do not take Dr. French's word for it or Dr. Sharps's word for it. Do your research. We will point you to the right resources and the right sources of information, but we each must take the responsibility to individually go through that and establish our position, make a choice, and be willing to stand by the consequences of those choices, positive or negative. Dr. French, I'll hand over to you.
I just want to say, stress that it has to be your personally held religious belief. They actually won't take it if you say my church says. And I actually helped somebody write their religious exemption letter. She was not an SDA. She was working for an SDA organization. And it was a very interesting process that we went through, but they accepted it. And so not all of them are accepting it. I want to say that a lot of attorneys will tell you, and this is crazy, but that there's nothing you can do, and that's wrong. And there's 2 sites, and I'll try to share those with Seth, so he has them for you later in the week, that actually recommend, and some even provide, legal services for the people who are trying to get exemption. They were very instrumental, or still are very instrumental in the United case right now. And of course, we're watching in action, because what's going on with Southwest Airlines is all about the pilots who have said no. And that's why they have now canceled how many flights? It was 1,000 as of yesterday, I think, flights, because they don't have enough pilots, and that date came up. And so people are standing. I mean, they really are standing. It is a tough thing to face losing your job. It is a tougher thing to lose your health. And I don't think any of us are making little of losing your job. It's a big deal. But if people stand like these pilots, they stood, and now they're losing a lot of money just in 2 days. I heard the figure. I don't remember what it was. It's huge, because they're trying to force something that's illegal. And the other thing I want to say to you about that is it is still illegal. They cannot, no one can legally force anyone to take the jab against their will, because if it's still experimental. And I was saddened when the FDA passed, Pfizer. And then I read about a week or so ago that it actually did not approve Pfizer's. It approved I can't say what it is, Comirnaty. And so it's not, so legally speaking, they still have not approved Pfizer. So it's still against the law for them to force anyone to take that shot. So that's the good news. And we need to stand. You need to take the next step. If they actually fire you, you need to get one of those sites that will help you legally take them to court, because that's what has to happen. They have to be taken to court. We have to win this. This is our bodies and our health. That's our right. And we may lose, but we have God on our side, and we know the end of the story. That's the important thing. We know the end of the story.
Thank you, Dr. French. A quick comment here again, just turning the conversation to practical elements again. I know there are many people that will be asking and that have comments in regards to if I can attend certain events, if I can travel, I need to go and see family members. There's elements of my life that I need to do, but the regulations as they are don't allow me to do that. I just wanted to, on that very specific point, see what comment the panelists had. And this is more going into the realm of, we talked about it earlier. Why is it important to know where you stand? Because you have to be able to absorb the consequences, positive and negative, of the choice you make. If you're unsure as to why you're making a decision and negative consequences come, it's going to be very tough for you. Dr. Sharps, did you have a word on that specific point around how people navigate the negative consequences of holding a position?
Yes, and I really appreciated all the comments that were made. I have nothing to add to the substance of what was said, but I think what we should all understand, I want to go back to what I said earlier, there are more political and economic implications behind this than there are scientific. And the point I want to make is that what we're going through now, because I don't want to minimize the very difficult angst that people are going through with what's happening now. But this is kind of a dress rehearsal, a sneak preview for things that are coming down the pike. So we need to start rehearsing right now and really understanding what we're all about, because it's not going to get better. It's not going to get easier. These political and economic forces are way more powerful than all the scientific stuff that's going on. And so for some of us, it's going to come to the point where, for example, Esther said, I'm going to stand this ground, and if I perish, I perish. Many of us aren't going to be able to do that, and it's going to be very, very difficult. So what I want us to think about is not all of the Title VII and all of this, but understand this as a sneak preview, a dress rehearsal from what are you going to do when the next set of mandates come out. This is baby stuff compared to what's happening, what's going to be coming down the pike. So we need to start thinking about how important our job is, how important our relationships are with friends, family, associates, and even spouses. These are very, very difficult things that I'm not a psychologist, and I don't want to even get into those matters, but I think that fundamentally, you need to understand that there's more political and economic, job, etc. And you need to start thinking about now, how are you going to be prepared? Not so much for this. This is baby stuff. I think your panel eloquently showed how you can deal with this, but how are you going to deal with the next one that comes down the road and subsequent ones? So it's very important. I think this is a very good wake-up call for us to kind of see, who are we? Who are we about? And who are we going to shut up or put our allegiance to? Dr. Ruling talked about Daniel. I talked about Esther. And we need to figure out who we are, and we need to start getting ourselves ready. Now, this is easy to deal with. And I'm going through some personal stuff too. Some of you know that I compete in athletics. I'm seriously considering retiring. And for what Dr. Ruling said, I don't want to be taking tests every time I go to compete. A test which is not really valid. See, there's not a whole lot of science here. And so forget about all the science. Understand the political, religious, and economic considerations and proceed from that standpoint. And I think we're going to be more equipped and qualified for the next set of issues that come down the road.
Dr. Sharps. Dr. Ruling, did you have a point specifically on the topic of what do people do with the consequences of having their position? Okay, 30 seconds.
In Houston, Texas, the Methodist Hospital was going to fire many healthcare workers, and when they objected religiously, they were going to be fired. But Liberty Counsel came down, gave them a letter, and they let them all stay because Liberty Counsel is a good resource, I think. And I've online, they are providing and helping lots of people. They have a whole team of lawyers, and they may be able to help. I haven't really researched it myself. I live in the country. Someone just said country living. Yes, I live on a gravel road, no police department in this town, and I'm happy with that. Basically, everything is fine. I would just say the sign to get in the countries is when you see the abomination standing where it ought not. And gay marriage stood where it ought not in the Supreme Court. The Pope stood where he ought not in the Congress. And I think time to get out of the cities and into the country, because martial law will be coming to cities. And country is great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruling. I just want to, again, just steer the conversation again in terms of the practical elements, because I think the nub of the discussion, what we're talking about here, is people are asking the question, and I hear this a lot when I talk to people, I just want my old life back. I wasn't particularly convinced about the science per se, but I wanted my old life back. I couldn't travel. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. And I wanted to do those things. And I think the real nub of the conversation and the topic, and I just want to put this very strongly again to the panelists to see if they have a comment on it, is the importance really of understanding that if you're going to have a position, there more than likely is going to be a cost to that. And I think the real issue is, are we prepared to pay that price? Those that know me know that before the pandemic, I was traveling an awful lot. Since the pandemic, my wings have been clipped. I joke with Dr. Jim and Dr. Elisa very often, but I've had to purpose in my heart that actually travel in this current age is probably something I may not do again, ever. And this is, that's just a fact I have to come to terms with, because I know why I have the position I have, and I'm prepared to accept the consequences. So I just want to put strongly again to the panelists, if they have a comment on what it means to have a position, to stand on it, and to even be able to absorb the negative consequences that come with that. Dr. French, I see a hand.
I just wanted to say that the cost is so incredibly high to cave, that you need to think long and hard about it. One of the doctors I listened to was Dr. Nathan Thompson, and he did a cool thing. He had a patient that had to take the jab, and because he was going to lose his job and he couldn't find a way out. And so Dr. Thompson said, "Can I please take your blood before and then after the first one, and then after the second one?" Some of you may have heard him talk about this. And it was in that blood work was so revealing, and without getting into the details about his lymphocytes, spiking up because he was fighting something, and then everything tanking out, all his fighting system tanking out after the second he was looking at an autoimmune disease. And some people don't feel the negative effects of the jab. Many do. But if you end up with a lifetime autoimmune, because we don't know how long it's no one knows, right? That is a heavy price to pay. I mean, of course, some people have paid with their lives. They think upwards to 50,000 people have died in the United States of the vaccination, but there are so many other things. It's a heavy price to pay for not being able to travel, for not being able to have my life back, because if you talk to people who have serious autoimmune diseases, they will tell you, I would trade having my wings clipped, for this any day. And so the cost is high. That's what I want to say. The cost is potentially very high.
Thank you, Dr. French. Did any of the other panelists have a comment, again, very specifically on that point of risk cost? Because I think a lot of the conversations I have, again, with a lot of scientifically and engineering minded people, the conversation comes down to risk mitigation. If you listen to the prevailing view that you'll hear in a lot of the media outlets, it's presented as the risks of taking the jab are minimal and such, fine. But there is a risk, and you have to be aware of that risk and weigh it appropriately against what is the cost of not taking action. And if you're equipped, as Dr. Sharps has said, your immune system is the best form of PPE, and you have educated yourself on what things you can do to strengthen your adaptive immune system, which is what Dr. French was referring to, the numbers start to crater. It's all well and good having a very specific resistance to one thing, and Dr. Ruling, perhaps you can correct my science if I'm going off-piste. You have a very specific resistance to one thing, but if your general immune system is weakened, the next thing that your body could have dealt with beforehand, now it can't. What position are you in then? What are the risks of that? And this is the broader conversation that I think we just want to stress to everybody. There are risks to whatever course of action you go down, whether you want to take the jab, whether you don't want to take the jab. Everything is a risk. And you have to make a judgment as to which risks I'm prepared to accept and which risks I'm not prepared to accept. And you have to do that from an informed position. Dr. Ruling, can I just go to you?
I lost my thought listening to you. Sorry.
I do apologize. So I am prone to ramble at times, but I just want to stress that to everybody. I'm just we're wrapping up our kind of conversation here. And I just wanted to throw out to the panelists if they had kind of any last remarks on the topic of COVID, on any of the themes or lenses that we have discussed today, just as we close the conversation. Tiffany, I saw your hand. I'll go to you first.
Okay, I'm hitting all kind of buttons here. When you were just speaking, I thought of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they knew the consequences. They knew what they were up against. And I just want everyone to remember that when we stand for God, He will stand for us. So don't have fear. Fear is the lowest frequency that we can be on. And fear weakens the immune system, and God has not given us the spirit of fear. So just educate yourselves, stay in a high place, stay in love, pray. Don't get angry at people who just don't know, and just try your best to inform people that may not know or that are seeking different ways in order how to do this, whether they've gotten it or they haven't. Just pray for them and try to guide them in the best way that you can. And don't let it consume you, and turn the news off. That's what I can say.
Okay, Dr. Ruling.
One thing, we don't know for sure all the factors involved with this, just like diet influences disease. 5G radiation may be a factor in people with a cell phone to their ear all the time, et cetera. High radiation. Some of COVID may be radiation sickness with virus particles in the bloodstream. We don't really know. And so just living natural basically is a help. And God help us. I believe that we have to stand firm. We're going into end times, and time to get our Bibles out and be deeper in that for sure.
Dr. French?
You know, I just want to say that I think Daniel and his friends and the story of Esther both give me such strength to go through this recently. The life of Jesus has given me so much strength, because, you know, when he was near his end, when he was getting ready to go to the cross, sometimes he did not speak. Sometimes he kept quiet. And sometimes when he spoke few words. And sometimes he spoke out. We need to be in a prayerful matter all the time. We need to depend on God to tell us what to say and when to say it and when to keep our mouth shut, because our greatest desire, I know mine is, and I'm sure all of yours is to represent our loving Heavenly Father in the way that we should, and B, to bring as many people to the cross as we can before the time is up. And we can't do that by being hateful. You know, like Tiffany said, we've got to do everything in love. And sometimes it means to speak loudly. Sometimes it means to keep our mouth shut and have a humble, meek spirit.
Thank you, Dr. French. Dr. Sharps, did you have any kind of closing remarks on any of the topics we've covered today in regards to COVID and the jab, or how people in terms of mandates? Any final comments there?
Yeah, I really appreciate the comments that were just made. What I would add is, the more equipped and qualified we are in understanding God's both moral and natural laws and being in harmony with them, the more we're going to be equipped to deal with all of these things. And you've heard various variations of that. You know, I started the prayer out saying, without him, we can do nothing. With him, all things are possible. So we need to get back to basics. And as an original medicinist, that's going back to the original purpose that we're here for in our original design, is that's to have a right relationship with God and a right relationship with both his moral and his natural laws. And what I've heard a lot of the panelists doing is talking about various ways of practicing that. So that's what I want to leave us with. Let's get back to basics. Let's understand who we are. We're children of royalty. We're children of a king, and we shouldn't be acting like serfs. So let's get back to the original design, original medicine, which is both the moral and the natural laws, and we don't have to worry about anything. We'll be able to go through any storms, and this is difficult. I know that personally and professionally, it's very difficult, a lot of things that we're going with, but we need to go back to the original, back to our original design, our purpose, and then be able to stand tall and then proceed accordingly. So I think that's what I'd like, the parting thought I would leave. I'd like to leave to the various attendees at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Tiffany, final word, and then Dr. Ruling will close there.
Okay, I just wanted to let everyone know, for those who are struggling with your jobs and you really don't want to go down the route of all the legal aspect and the religious exemption or medical exemptions, and you're looking for something else, Seth, I sent him a link to a website of different jobs in all aspects who don't discriminate, and they're hiring people whether they have the jab or not, and giving people opportunities to apply for them, and it's all over the states. So it should be on the link that he'll be sharing. I don't know when you're going to share that stuff, but I just wanted to let that be known, because some people may not want to do religious exemptions and medical exemptions, and they're looking for a different way of finding work. So he'll have a website to share. It'll be there for you guys to refer to.
Thank you, Tiffany. I will give all the information about the links and repository of information after we do this. Dr. Ruling, your final comments.
Yeah, one last thought, and that was Italy a year and a half reported that 99% of the people that died had pre-existing conditions: heart, diabetes, cancer, lung conditions, and so on. These are people who are on drugs. prescription drugs. And so I believe, which are petroleum based. We don't know really the effect in the immune system with what the drugs do and the overall why some people react and react badly. But I'm sure that we need to abstain as much as possible, learn how to live so we don't need the chronic medication. If you got hit by a truck and need to go to the hospital, yeah, have the x-rays, have them set your bone, put you under anesthesia, fine. But chronically living day in, day out with prescription drugs is I think, a kiss of death, especially in the context of COVID. And should you get the shot, bad idea, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to all the panelists. Those that are listening, hope you found this session valuable. Just before we kind of fully wrap up, I just wanted to cover off a few issues. I know there have been a lot of questions. We have endeavored to point and refer to sources and the questions that arise from that. And I know some people have been trying to follow that in real time as they are listening. We are going to make a list of sources as much as possible organized by the themes in which we were discussing. So we had the general historical perspective. We had COVID in the workplace, which is what Tiffany covered in mandates. We briefly covered as well from Dr. French in the home. She also brought up the issue of shedding. We talked about we didn't get a chance so much to, but the societal impacts of COVID. So we're going to endeavor, because we want to, don't take our word for it. I want to stress this again, do not take our word for it. We're going to release the information that we pointed to, referred to, cited. We're going to put that all together by the end of the week, and we'll share that on our online community, Mighty Networks. I'll just ask Dr. Timothy if you can just share the link to our online community on Mighty Networks. We have a community where we share all of our information, support each other. We have weekly calls, and that's where this information will be shared. We will also edit this recording and put it online for those that were jumping in and out and weren't able to stay for the whole conversation. We will also have that, a link to that, posted on our online community as well. So if you are wondering, where can I get more information? How can I connect with Iiom? I really love this. I want more of it. Let me know when the next one is happening? We will certainly have that information shared. The link has just been posted. It's a Linktree link that has a link to all of our different social medias, and you can follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, and you can have a link to join our online community, which is where we will be posting all of these resources. So once again, I would just like to say thank you to each of the panelists for their perspectives, for their time, and also the hidden investment they make to prepare. You don't just rock up to these things with no preparation. They put a lot of time into organizing their thoughts and the resources and the kind of reference list that we'll be sending out towards the end of the week. And I just want those that wanted to dig more into specific topics and wanted us to, okay, can we discuss this more? And we saw the questions in the live chat. This live podcast series, we're going to be doing more of them. We want to get the word out. We want to have these kind of dialogue, these kind of conversations that you can listen into to be informed. And so you can go away and you can think for yourself, what am I going to choose to do today, tomorrow, next week, next month? And we really do want to emphasize that. So this is a series that we're not going anywhere. We will be here. We'll announce the next date for the live recording as well as the topic. So if you want to hear more in this kind of theme of how we've been discussing and how we've been exploring COVID and other health topics, it won't just be COVID. It just happens that is very topical at the moment. We'll be looking at all of these things from the perspective of original medicine, and that's why we're calling it the Original Take. So I just want to say thank you to the panelists again. Thank you to everybody that's listening. Hope you've enjoyed the session. We'll close the official recording here. And Dr. French, if I could ask if you could close us off as we started with a word of prayer.
Sure. Father in heaven, we are so grateful for your love and for your never-ending acceptance and your word and all the messages that you've given us to keep us well and to keep us strong. I pray that you will send your spirit to go with everyone that was present here. help us to learn the things that you want us to know. Help us to have the courage of Daniel and his friends and of Esther so that we can properly represent you, so that we can stay well and strong, and so that most of all, we can bring other people to your loving hands and eventually to live with you eternally. In the name of your son, Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Okay, thank you to everybody. The time for me is now an hour I don't want to repeat out loud. So I'm just going to say we can end the recording here, Dr. Timothy. We can end the